My parents secretly left my house to my brother, so I took everything back. My parents secretly drew up a will that left the house I had been paying for to my brother. The moment I found out, I stopped every transfer I was making to them and filed a lawsuit that left him drowning in debt. I stumbled across the will completely by accident. It was a gloomy Tuesday morning in Bellevue, Washington. Rain hammered against the windows while I spent my morning at my parents' house instead of heading into my job as a finance director in Seattle. I had taken time off because my dad needed help organizing paperwork for his accountant. Technology had never been his strong suit, so I was always the family's unofficial IT guy. I sat in his home office feeding endless stacks of W-2 forms, insurance policies, tax documents, and old receipts into his desktop scanner. At first, it looked like just another thick sheet of ivory paper sliding through the machine. Then, I saw my brother's name. Tyler. A second later, I saw it again. Tyler David Vance. My eyes immediately locked onto the title near the top of the page. Last Will and Testament of Arthur and Helen Vance. My hands froze before I even realized what I was doing. The scanner stopped mid-feed, leaving the document halfway inside, while the bright LED light stretched across the dark printed words. I carefully pulled the paper free and laid it flat on the desk. Then I read it. When I reached the end, I started over from the beginning, reading much more slowly this time, desperately hoping I'd misunderstood the legal wording. I kept telling myself there had to be another interpretation. Maybe I was missing something. I wasn't. The document clearly stated that Tyler David Vance would receive full and exclusive ownership of every piece of real estate they owned, including the house at 142 Pinehurst Drive, Bellevue, Washington. It didn't stop there. Tyler would also inherit every financial account, every investment portfolio, every savings account, and every liquid asset they possessed. Every possession, every piece of furniture, every belonging, everything they owned was going to him. My brother was 30 years old. He lived in my parents' basement. He spent roughly 14 hours a day playing Call of Duty. The only steady job he'd held in the past 4 years was a short stint at a grocery store that didn't last. This was also the same Tyler I'd personally loaned $8,000 for what he swore was a groundbreaking app idea. The money disappeared, and so did the app. Even now, my mom still made him grilled cheese sandwiches around 1 o'clock every afternoon because he usually slept until noon. And somehow, they were leaving him absolutely everything. Me, nothing. Not $1. Not one sentence. Not even a brief acknowledgement, like, to our oldest son, Liam, we leave our gratitude. I wasn't mentioned at all. The paper shook in my hands. Then I realized it wasn't the paper. It was me. A wave of icy numbness rushed through my body so suddenly that it felt like someone had injected ice water straight into my veins. Even though the house was warm and comfortable, I couldn't stop shivering. My eyes drifted to the signatures at the bottom. The will had been signed and notarized 8 months earlier. 8 months. For nearly a year, my parents had known exactly what they planned to do. They sat across from me at Thanksgiving. They smiled at me on Christmas morning. They hugged me on my birthday. All the while, they already knew they had erased me from their future. But the most disgusting part, the part that made my stomach turn, was something else entirely. I had paid for that house. My dad's voice echoed from the kitchen. Liam, what's taking so long in there? I need those PDFs emailed before noon. I looked down at the will one last time. I took a long, slow breath. Instead of anger, a strange calm settled over me. It wasn't comforting. It was the kind of terrifying peace that only comes after something inside you finally breaks. I walked out of the office and into the hallway. The first thing I noticed was the hardwood floor I'd paid to have refinished 2 years earlier. When I reached the kitchen, Dad was sitting comfortably at the oak dining table, sipping black coffee. That table had been my anniversary gift to my parents after their old one had started falling apart. I held up the will. So, I said, my voice eerily steady, this is the plan? Everything goes to Tyler. Dad's expression changed instantly. The irritation on his face vanished, replaced by a ghostly white look. His coffee mug froze halfway to his mouth as he stared at the document. His eyes flicked from the paper, back to me. Slowly, and almost too carefully, he set the mug down without making a sound. Liam, that's not what you think. Oh, really? I asked. I took another step toward him. Because it looks exactly like you're leaving everything to Tyler. The house, the bank accounts, the investments, the entire estate. I paused. You know, the same house whose mortgage I've been paying for the last 6 years. At that moment, my mom walked into the kitchen, tightening the belt of her fluffy pink bathrobe, even though it was already 11:30 in the morning. Her eyes landed on the document in my hand. Liam, sweetheart, what's going on? The instant she recognized the paper, she let out a sharp gasp. It wasn't confusion. It was guilt. Oh, she whispered. Yeah, I answered. Exactly. Oh. Dad pushed back his chair so quickly, it scraped loudly across the hardwood floor as he stood. Son, please, sit down. Let us explain. I've been paying your mortgage for 6 years, I said quietly. The softer my voice became, the more frightening it sounded. 6 years, Dad. I've covered the property taxes, the homeowner's insurance, the $12,000 roof replacement, the new HVAC system, every single expense. I've poured hundreds of thousands of dollars into keeping a roof over your heads. While Tyler sits downstairs wearing a gaming headset, yelling at teenagers on the internet. It's complicated, Dad muttered, rubbing his temples as if a headache could make this conversation disappear. Complicated. I actually laughed when he said it. Those two words sounded so weak, so completely meaningless that I couldn't believe he expected them to explain any of this. Complicated? I repeated with a bitter chuckle. Mom hurried toward me, reaching for my arm. The second her hand got close, I pulled away like she was something toxic. Liam, sweetheart, you have to understand, she pleaded, her eyes already filling with tears. You have an amazing career. You're a director at your company. You drive a nice car. You've built such a successful life for yourself. She paused before continuing. But Tyler struggles. He has anxiety. He needs stability. We just wanted to make sure he wouldn't end up homeless after we're gone. Something inside me snapped. Not gradually, not quietly. It felt like a heavy steel cable stretched to its breaking point before finally giving way with one sharp, violent crack. My entire adult life, I'd been the dependable one, the responsible son, the problem solver, the family's personal ATM. Whenever someone needed help, I was the one they called. I looked my mother straight in the eyes. So because I work 60 hours a week, because I actually got my life together, I deserve nothing. Liam, language, Mom said automatically. It was pure instinct, the same correction I'd heard my entire childhood. I couldn't help laughing. The absurdity of it was almost unbelievable. Are you serious? I asked. You secretly cut me out of your will while emptying my bank account, and your biggest concern is my language. Liam, that's enough. Dad's voice became firm. It was the exact same tone that used to make me feel small when I was 12 years old. Your mother and I made an incredibly difficult estate decision. We believed it was what was best for the family. No, I shot back immediately. You made the decision that was best for Tyler. You decided to reward his laziness with the money I earned. Just admit it. Right then, the basement door creaked open. Heavy footsteps slowly climbed the stairs. A few seconds later, Tyler wandered into the kitchen. He was wearing stained gray sweatpants and an old faded graphic t-shirt. His hair looked like he'd rolled out of bed after sleeping for 2 days, and his unshaven face made him look more like an exhausted college freshman than a 30-year-old man. Still rubbing his eyes, he mumbled, "What's everybody yelling about?" Then he noticed the document in my hand. His expression changed instantly. The sleepy look disappeared. A guilty stiffness replaced it. I stared directly at him. So, you knew. It wasn't really a question. You knew about this. His shoulders lifted in a lazy shrug. They told me a few months ago, he admitted. I didn't think it was that big of a deal. You make a ton of money anyway. I just stood there, staring at him. The entitlement in that sentence was almost impossible to comprehend. You didn't think it was a big deal? Liam, please don't be angry, Mom cried, as tears finally spilled down her cheeks. We love both of you equally. We really do. She wiped at her face. But you don't need the money. You're stable. You're successful. Tyler needs help. He needs a safety net. Tyler needs a job, I snapped. He's trying, Dad fired back. The job market is really difficult right now. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Dad, I got my first corporate job during one of the worst economic downturns in decades. I worked my ass off. I pulled all-nighters. I earned every promotion I ever got. And now you're punishing me because I succeeded. We're not punishing you, sweetheart, Mom said in the wounded tone she always used whenever she wanted to become the victim. We're just being realistic. Tyler can't afford to buy a house in this economy. You already own that beautiful condo downtown. The condo I pay for entirely by myself, I reminded her, while I'm also paying for this house. Dad leaned both hands on the table and let out a long, tired sigh. Liam, we appreciate everything you've done for us. We honestly do. But Tyler's situation is different. He's fragile. That was it. I couldn't hold it in anymore. He's fragile because the two of you made him that way, I shouted. You let him quit every job the moment it became difficult. You welcomed him back into this house without charging him a penny. You still do his laundry. You give him spending money. And now, you're rewarding him for being a parasite. Tyler crossed his arms and smirked. Dude, why are you being such a jerk about this? He said. It's just a house. I looked at my younger brother. This was the kid I defended from bullies when we were growing up. The same brother whose college application essays I'd helped write. The same man I'd loaned $8,000, knowing deep down I'd never see that money again. Get a job, Tyler, I said quietly. He rolled his eyes. I'm looking, bro. No, you're not. I shook my head. You're just waiting for Mom and Dad to die so you can inherit the house you've been living in for free. Boys, please, Mom cried. We're family. Family takes care of each other. No, I replied calmly. I gently placed the will on the kitchen island before looking each of them in the eye. Families give to one another. I paused. Parasites only take. You've already made your choice. With that, I turned around and walked away. I headed down the hallway, grabbed my wool coat from the rack, picked up my keys from the bowl by the front door, and didn't look back. Dad hurried after me. Liam, wait, he shouted. Let's talk about this. I never slowed down. I opened the front door, stepped out into the cold Seattle rain, and slammed it shut behind me. A few moments later, I was sitting behind the wheel of my Audi, the car I'd bought myself after my latest promotion, and driving away. I never made another mortgage payment. I never paid another property tax bill. I never covered another repair. The money stopped that day. The next morning, I hired an attorney. Her name was Evelyn Brooks, and she specialized in financial litigation. I laid out everything for her. The bank transfers, the mortgage payments, the receipts, the home repairs, the insurance premiums, every dollar I'd spent over the previous 6 years. She organized the paperwork into neat stacks, studying each document carefully before finally looking up at me. Liam, she said, this isn't just generosity. This is financial reliance. She explained that I'd spent years investing enormous amounts of money into preserving property that legally belonged to someone else, while my parents secretly prepared legal documents, ensuring that all of the benefits of those investments would eventually go to a third party, who hadn't contributed a single cent. That goes straight to the heart of unjust enrichment, she said. We filed the lawsuit. My parents tried to have it dismissed. They lost. The judge denied their motion, and from that moment on, the writing was on the wall. 7 months passed after I discovered the will. Before the case could go to trial, state law required us to attend mandatory mediation. We met in a spotless conference room in downtown Seattle under harsh fluorescent lights. Evelyn and I sat together on one side of a long glass table. Across from us sat my parents and their attorney, who looked like he'd barely slept in weeks. Tyler wasn't there. The first thing I noticed was how much my mom had aged. In only 7 months, she looked like she'd grown 10 years older. Dad never looked directly at me. He kept staring down at his legal pad, with his jaw clenched tight. The retired Superior Court judge, serving as mediator, opened the session by laying out the reality of the situation. If this case proceeds to trial, he said, based on the documentation Mr. Vance has provided, there is a strong likelihood that a jury will rule in his favor. He paused before continuing. That could result in a substantial judgment, possible bankruptcy, and ultimately the forced sale of your home. Today's goal is to avoid that outcome. My parents' attorney cleared his throat. My clients are prepared to offer a settlement of $60,000, payable in monthly installments over the next 15 years. I couldn't help it. I laughed. The sound echoed through the silent room. No, I said. Evelyn's voice was even colder than mine. That offer is insulting. My client is owed approximately $285,000 in principal and accrued interest. If your clients aren't prepared to make a serious proposal, we'll gladly proceed to trial. Mom suddenly buried her face in her hands. We don't have that kind of money, she cried. We don't have any cash. Everything we own is tied up in the house. Then sell the house, I answered without emotion. For the first time all afternoon, Dad looked directly at me. His eyes were filled with pure resentment. You'd make your own parents homeless just to get revenge? I leaned forward across the table. You were perfectly willing to let me bankrupt myself so Tyler could have an easy future. You used me. You treated me like your personal ATM. I'm simply collecting what I'm owed. The mediator separated us into different rooms. For the next 6 exhausting hours, he walked back and forth, carrying offers between both sides. $100,000. No. $150,000. Paid over 10 years. No. I told Evelyn I wanted a real resolution. Otherwise, we'd go to trial and let every ugly detail become part of the public record. Finally, around 4:30 that afternoon, the mediator returned holding a signed proposal. They're out of options, he said. They're offering an irrevocable, legally binding settlement. He slid the paperwork across the table. They'll execute a new estate agreement granting you a first priority lien for $200,000 against the estate. When either parent passes away, or if the house is sold, you will receive the first $200,000 before any other beneficiary receives anything. If the estate doesn't contain enough assets, the house must be sold to satisfy the lien. Evelyn carefully reviewed every page, scanning the legal language line by line. Finally, she looked up at me. Liam, the house is currently appraised at about $850,000. They still owe roughly $300,000 on the mortgage. That leaves approximately $550,000 in equity. If you accept this settlement, your $200,000 is fully secured. You avoid the enormous expense and uncertainty of a trial. And their original plan completely falls apart. She closed the folder. Tyler won't inherit a free house. He'll inherit a property carrying a legally enforceable $200,000 lien. He won't be able to keep it unless he somehow pays you. Realistically, he'll have to sell the house just to satisfy the debt. For a moment, I pictured Tyler sitting in that basement, believing he'd won the lottery, only to discover that his winning ticket had already gone up in flames. I'll take it, I said. The following morning, everyone signed the agreement. The lien was officially recorded with the county. There was no way around it. 2 weeks after everything became final, my phone rang. The caller ID surprised me. Tyler. We hadn't spoken in 8 months, I answered. Hello? Hey, he said quietly. His voice sounded empty, defeated. I just had a huge fight with Mom and Dad. Oh, I replied. Trouble in paradise? He ignored the comment. They finally told me about the settlement. He hesitated before continuing. They said that when they die, I have to pay you $200,000 before I can even inherit the house. And since I don't have that kind of money, I'll have to sell it. I leaned back in my office chair. That's correct. There was another pause. You stole my inheritance, Liam. I answered immediately. No, Tyler. I took back my money. The money I spent keeping a roof over your head while you sat downstairs playing video games for 6 years. You're inheriting exactly what you earned. Nothing. Silence filled the line. It lasted much longer than I expected. Honestly, I thought he was about to explode. I expected him to scream at me, to curse me out, to call me every name he could think of. Instead, he spoke so quietly, I almost didn't hear him. I didn't know. Another long pause. I swear to God, Liam, I had no idea you were the one paying the mortgage. They never told me, Tyler said quietly. They just kept saying Dad had found a better job and everything was under control. I let the silence hang for a moment before asking the question that had been sitting in my mind. Would it have changed anything if you had known? There was another long pause. Finally, he sighed. I don't know. His voice cracked. Probably not. I was comfortable. I was a leech. I honestly didn't know what to say. That was the most honest and the most self-aware thing I'd ever heard my brother admit. Then he surprised me again. I got a job last week, he said. I'm working night shifts at an Amazon fulfillment center in Kent. It sucks. My feet are bleeding by the end of every shift. But I'm saving money. I'm moving out of Mom and Dad's basement next month. I found a tiny studio apartment I'm splitting with 2 roommates. I frowned. Why are you telling me all this? His answer came almost as a whisper. Because you were right. About everything. Mom and Dad crippled me. They made it so easy to fail that I never had a reason to grow up. When you blew the whole family apart, it was the wake-up call I needed. Another pause. I'm sorry, Liam. For everything. Before I could answer, he hung up. For a long time, I just sat there staring at my phone. 14 months passed. By then, I'd been promoted again and was serving as a senior vice president at my company. My annual income was well over $200,000. For the first time in years, my life was peaceful. No family drama, no emergency phone calls, no unexpected requests for money. Since the mediation, I hadn't spoken to either of my parents. Then, one Sunday morning at 3 o'clock, my phone rang. It was Mom. For a second, I almost ignored it. Something in my gut told me not to. I answered. What? She was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. Liam, it's your father. He had a massive heart attack. We're at Overlake Hospital. Please, Liam, please come. The doctors don't know if he's going to survive the night. The line went dead. A few minutes later, I was dressed and driving through the rain-soaked streets outside Seattle toward the hospital. The roads were nearly empty. When I walked into the intensive care waiting room, my mother barely looked like herself. She was pale, shaking, completely exhausted. The moment she saw me, she burst into tears and rushed over, burying her face against my chest. I didn't hug her back. I simply stood there while she cried. Thank God you came, she whispered between sobs. Thank God. How's Dad? I asked, keeping my voice even. He's in surgery. They're putting in stents. She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. Oh, Liam, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything we did to you. Before I could respond, the elevator doors opened. Tyler stepped out. He was still wearing a neon safety vest and a pair of dirty work boots. It was obvious he'd come straight from his warehouse shift. He looked exhausted. He'd lost weight. His face looked older. For the first time in a long time. He looked like a grown man. He hugged Mom first. Then he walked over to me. He held out his hand. Hey, Liam. I looked down at it. The skin was rough, calloused, the hands of someone who actually worked for a living. I shook it. Hey, Tyler. The three of us sat together in that waiting room for the next 4 hours. A family that had fallen apart. A family that wasn't sure if it could ever be put back together. Eventually, the surgeon came out. Dad had survived. They'd cleared the blockage, but his heart had suffered significant damage. Recovery would take months. His lifestyle would have to change completely. But he was going to live. When we were finally allowed into his room, he looked unbelievably small, lying in the hospital bed. Machines surrounded him from every direction. The moment his eyes found me standing near the doorway, tears rolled down his cheeks. Liam, he whispered. You came. I did, I answered quietly. There wasn't any warmth in my voice. I don't deserve it, he said as he reached toward me with a trembling hand. I was so wrong, son. So incredibly wrong. I convinced myself you were strong enough not to need us. And I believed Tyler would end up homeless if we didn't protect him. I destroyed our family trying to save him. Yeah, I replied softly. You did. Mom gently took hold of my arm. Can we try to fix this? Can we be a family again? I looked at her. Then I looked at Dad, lying helplessly in that hospital bed. Finally, I turned toward Tyler, standing there in his worn work boots after finally building a life of his own. I don't know, I admitted honestly. The money's settled. The lawsuit is over. But you didn't just take my money. You stole my trust. For 6 years, you looked me in the eye while using my love and loyalty against me. I know, Dad whispered. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make that right. I slowly stepped toward the door. Maybe, I said, but things will never go back to the way they were. I'm never paying another bill for either of you. I'm never rescuing anyone financially again. If we're going to have a relationship, it'll be on my terms. Mom nodded frantically through her tears. Anything. Whatever you want. I looked at Tyler. He simply gave me a small, respectful nod. When I finally left the hospital, the cool Seattle morning air hit my face. I didn't ask any of them to forgive me. The truth was, I wasn't even sure I could forgive them. The betrayal had gone too deep. Some wounds don't disappear just because someone apologizes. But as I climbed into my car and started the engine, something inside me felt different. For the first time in nearly 2 years, the weight I'd been carrying on my chest felt just a little lighter. I got my money back. I kept my dignity. And somehow, against all odds, my brother had finally earned a life that actually belonged to him.